Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What's your homeowners association horror story? Part 3. When we moved in, we got permission to build a fence. They said cedar treated pine was fine. Well, a neighbor didn't like that and called HOA. We got an email shortly thereafter from HOA Pres that there were some concerns about our wood. So he came by real quick to give it a good sniff to see if it was, in fact, not cedar. He is now King Fence Sniffer. Note, pine boards treated to look like cedar. They refused to let us have garage sales. My dad protested at a meeting, and the president said it was because they didn't want undesirables in the neighborhood. My dad said, "Oh, so you mean anybody who isn't white, right?" And the president threw him out of the meeting. We had a garage sale anyway. My father-in-law's condo corp has a shared pool. The old folks don't like to share, so they have all kinds of silly rules, like no more than one guest per resident, residents only times alternating every hour, etc. My father-in-law can't even take his own 2 grandkids for a swim because he'd exceed the number of allowed guests. So many rules, the D pool is usually empty. Because the residents were still breaking the rules, they passed a new rule that if any resident was caught breaking the pool rules, they would close the pool to everyone for a week and post the offender's name and reason for the closure on the community bulletin board. Effing children. Not me, but a friend said they don't allow fences not made from wood. But the LT governor of my state bought a house there, put up a vinyl fence, and they won't make him remove it. Who's more wrong? Not allowing the fencing for others, or he for being allowed? Not my story, but my dad's. He moved into a new townhouse in summer of 2013. It was a foreclosure property as the previous tenants were kicked out for not paying their mortgage and for not paying their HOA dues. They gave everyone in the HOA new patios and decks the summer prior. It was required and you had to get a new deck/patio. But the tenants had to pay for them in monthly installments in the next 3 years along with their HOA dues. As I said, the previous tenants foreclosed on their home. However, there was one rule placed when they got the decks, which was that you couldn't move out without paying off your deck first. He was told by HOA that he would not have to pay off the deck because it was foreclosed and he was not responsible at all for paying it off. Sweet! Free deck! He signed off on that. He moved in, but then he started getting assessments from the HOA for the deck. But wait, he wasn't supposed to be paying for the deck. He fought it with the board. Even with the signed thing saying we didn't have to pay for the deck, the board went against him. He ended up having to pay off the remaining balance on the deck. To this day, he refuses to speak about this topic. It's a trigger for him. For once, I feel like I have an H of a story to respond. My dad bought his house in 2004. One of the large selling points was that it did not have an HOA, one of the very few neighborhoods in my town that didn't. Well, 2009, my grandma died and it gave my dad enough money to pay off his house. More on why that is important in a moment. It must have been 2011, maybe 2012, but we got a knock on the door asking my dad to sign a petition to form a homeowners association. First time I ever heard my dad curse was when he told that lady, "F no, I bought this house in 2004 largely because I don't want a DHOA. Now get the H off my porch." Well, funny story, about 3 months later he got some mail informing him of the newly formed HOA. My dad was livid, so he went around asking neighbors what they had told this lady. Turns out that when an HOA is formed, they don't need to ask the resident or the legal owner if there is a lien on the property. So, since most everyone has a mortgage, the mortgage company says, "Yes, we would like to further protect our investment. Please form an HOA as fast as you can." My dad continues to talk about the HOA, but they didn't really do much. One time, he got a fine for a peach tree of his hanging too low over the fence, decided it was about 2 weeks until he could harvest most of the peaches, so he took the fine. That was about it until summer of 2014. One day, out of the blue, my dad got a warning about our little camper in the backyard. Now, we have had this 14 camper for almost as long as I can remember it. Every summer, we take a trip or two to another state, weekends into the mountains, and in the winter, we went elk hunting with this camper. Many of my fondest memories comes from this thing that we'd had for years, but just now we're getting told to move. So my dad did. He moved it to his brother's house for a while. Winter of 2016 came around and my uncle was selling his house. My dad decided it was enough time. Many other neighbors have trailers in their backyard and have for years. Who cares? We put it in the backyard and within a week had a warning. My father was livid once more. The best course of action my father had decided was to report all the neighbors with trailers, then give it a couple weeks and tell them about the upcoming board meeting. This came with great success. Almost 100 people show up to this board meeting, many of whom had purchased their new house with the fact that you could park things in the backyard and the lack of an HOA a huge selling point. Well, it went downhill fast. Not a happy person was there. Within 20 minutes of this board meeting, everyone on the board had resigned. Only the property manager remained. The next day, at about 8 a.m., my dad ran into my room with excitement. He had proclaimed to me that the property manager stepped down and the HOA had been dissolved. When my sister was hit by a drunk driver, the insurance took a few days to decide what to do with her car since it was a weekend. Neighbor called the police and said it was abandoned and had been there for months. Luckily, the police took our side. They pulled up an accident report showing that car across town 2 days ago, then told her to F off. They vetoed a cell tower because it would be ugly and we still have garbage service at home because of it. Friend of mine was in middle of potential foreclosure and only way to prevent was to lease their house and rent a room from me for discount. HOA denied since complex was at least capacity. They ended up foreclosing. Pretty sure the foreclosure lowered the property values. Not sure I understand the HOA's decision. My friends stopped paying their dues when the denial was made. This is actually something that is ongoing battle between my friend's mom and her HOA, or more specifically, one member. She lives inside this circular complex full of townhouses with a roundabout in the center that used to have a lot of trees and looked really nice, almost like a mini park. The HOA decided to cut down all of the trees without giving notice, and my friend's mom was peed. She went to complain about it, and they basically said, "Sorry, too late." In protest of them doing that, she decided to buy this big inflatable palm tree that she stuck on her balcony for all to see. One of the neighbors who was in the HOA decided to file a complaint because it looked gaudy. She knew exactly who it was, and it upset her more that this person did that instead of coming to talk to her after years of living near each other. She was able to keep her tree, and when Christmas came around, she even decorated it. She decided she was going to wage this war against the HOA and this neighbor by having annoying inflatable decorations on her balcony. When it started warming up, she bought a flamingo, which she likes to dress in Chicago Cubs or Blackhawks gear depending on the season. I told my friend he should get her a 6-foot wacky waving inflatable tube man to put on their next, which I think would be hilarious, but I don't know if she wants to take it that far. Didn't happen to me personally, but I guess I can tell you about my parents' experience with their HOA. Dad retired and decided that he really wanted to buy a camper and travel. Mom was all about it, both of them very excited. So, Dad runs off and trades his F-150 truck for an F-250 with a big A diesel V8, buys a gooseneck camper, and waits for spring. Camper in the backyard, truck in the garage, no big deal. Not long after, he gets a visit from a lady. She's got a list of rules from the HOA that was established long after my parents had built their house, something like 15 years later when the subdivision really took off, saying that Dad couldn't have the camper on his property because it was an eyesore. Mind you, this camper is in the backyard behind a 6-foot privacy fence. You could still see it, sure, but it's not like it was old and in disrepair either. So here's my retired parents living in a subdivision that has an HOA that was established long after they built their homes, and the HOA is expecting them to abide by rules they didn't agree to. He never moved the camper. My ex-boyfriend's father was part of the homeowners board for their townhouse community. His wife would walk their dog around the entire neighborhood every day and carry a notebook to write infractions to report back to her husband. Ridiculous stuff. Neighbors have a window AC unit? Reported and fined. Have a garden that's a square foot too big? Reported and fined. Some people have absolutely no lives. When I was a kid, I lived in one of the two front rooms of the house, which were the hottest in the summer and the coldest in the winter. My dad didn't like to use the AC, so we all just had fans. One summer, it got so unbearably hot in my room that fans just weren't cutting it, and I was miserable. My dad then put an AC unit in my window, and it was awesome. But it was short-lived because the HOA told us to take it down because it was an eyesore. My parents told them it was for their child, but they didn't care, so my parents had to take it down. The kicker is that just down the street, a guy who had the exact same model house as us had an AC unit installed in the same exact window as the one we had it in, and the HOA never said a word to him. Let me paint you a scene. A young married couple finds their first apartment, and although it is far from perfect, it is spacious and 2 minutes away from work. Mind you, this is in the beginning of August, in South Florida. On the day we move in, we see a letter posted for the HOA stating that someone has to be present in our unit while the workers are there to work on the central cooling unit. Okay, no big deal. I have the ability to work from home sometimes, so I did. Well, at the end of those 2 days, workers were to be there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we were told that the project was bigger than expected and found out exactly what was happening. They were replacing the piping of all 22 units in our complex, and we were lucky enough to have one of 2 points of access to the roof in our bedroom closet. That roof access was utilized for 24 days out of the month of August, anywhere from 1 to 14 hours a day. Newlyweds spent their first month of marriage alongside AC repairmen. Also, we still don't have functioning central air. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. See you in the next video.